Here's another quick example of categorical data and trying to answer a question about independence. So this one I actually made up. So we have data of gender and music preference in Tiny Town, USA, not a real place. We've got the men and the women, and they were asked to select a single music preference. And so these, it's not obvious that these would be exclusive categories, but in this setup, let's assume they were asked they could only pick one preference for music, and so these are going to be exclusive categories. So we can total them up in particular. If they weren't, then we might have trouble with this a little bit. And so we'd like to know if the gender affects music preference, or really a better way to say it without assuming causation is just, are these variables associated in a significant way, or are they pretty close to being independent? So to do this by hand, I'm going to use Excel to do part of this, but to do this by hand, remember we first need the marginals. So we need to put in totals. And so this is the column total here is 800, and the column total here is 1200. And so the grand total is 2000. Okay, well, that's going to be a good check on the row totals. Row total here happens to be 800 as well. That's an accident. 900, and then just 300. And indeed, 800 plus 900 plus 300 you can check. That's 2000. So that's a good check on arithmetic. Okay, so we could get lots of different percentages out of here. So for example, we could get the marginal percentages of hip hop, rock, pop, and classical. So let's even actually add those over here, just right over here. 800 over 2000 is 40%. 900 over 2000 is 45%. And 300 over 2000 is a measly 15%. Sorry, classical. Okay. We could get the marginal percentages of men versus women. 800 out of the total of 2000 is, again, happens to be the same, 40%. Just forgot to make them different. And women 60%. So it's a pretty women-dominated town here, interestingly enough. Okay. And of course here, this would be just 100%. So these are the marginal percentages. But more interesting is the conditional percentages. That if we look among the men, out of the 800 men, what percentage prefers hip-hop? What percentage prefers rock, pop, etc.? Okay. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and copy this table. So I want to save it because I think Excel will get confused if I do what I'm going to do and then I'm trying to get Excel to do it. So 320 out of 800. Remember, to get the conditionals, we always just look at out of only the men. Temporarily, that's our only universe. 320 is out of 800. That's going to be, if you do the calculation, that's actually 40%. Interestingly enough. Okay. Rock pop, 400 out of 800 is 50%. And classical, 80. You know what? Actually, I'm just going to even delete. Since we already have the numbers above, I'm just going to change these into the column percentages. Okay. So I'm choosing to take a column percentage. Okay, let me write that here. I'm taking column percentages, not because I have to, in order to condition on the variable gender and analyze the variable music preference. I could do it the other way and still get conclusions about independence, but it just feels more natural to me to do these columns. Okay, so 80 out of 800, that's 10%. Okay, now the women, 480 out of 1200, that turns out to be 40%. Interesting. And so 40% of the total of everybody prefers hip-hop. 40%, let me actually just copy that in there, since now I'm making this all percentages. Now this is going to be 100%. Okay. And this is going to be 100% because I'm doing column totals. Okay. And then these are the only two I have to do. Let me just go ahead and finish it before I make any conclusions. 500 out of 1200. Ooh, 5/12. What is that? Let's see. So 42%. Let's not be too finicky about accuracy. And then 220 out of 1200. I'm just doing some scratch calculations. 18%. Okay. Whoops. Wrong place. And that's still 100%. Okay. So here's the column percentages, i.e. conditional distributions conditioned on gender. Okay. So it's interesting that rock pop, we get the same number exactly, and then of course that's definitely the same number as the total. Sorry, hip hop, not rock pop. Rock pop, though, there seems to be a bit of a difference, and classical, there's actually a very significant difference. This number is almost double this number. Okay, so we're comparing. We look at the conditional percentages, and we look across for each variable that we're interested in analyzing. We look at the difference or lack of difference between the men and the women's column. So we're getting no difference. I'd say that's a pretty significant difference. We discussed in class how like a 20%-ish difference would be relevant. Let's divide 50 over 42. Remember, it's not just the difference. It's not the fact that it's an 8% difference. It's usually more interesting to take the ratio here. Okay, that's 1.19. So this 50 number is almost 20% bigger than this one. That's probably pretty significant. It looks like men are more likely to like rock pop than the women. And then the classical, that's a drastic difference. This is almost, the women's liking for classical is almost double the percentage of men. Okay, so let me go back to here and actually use Excel to make a nice little segmented bar chart. Go to bar, and like this, I think it's going to give me the, yeah, let me go ahead and right click, select data, and we can switch row and column. There we go. And so this is a nice graphical representation of what we're seeing with the percentages. Let me see if I can fit them all on. Okay. So there's the total, that's the marginal. Oh, and I accidentally got the total. No, that's just wrong. Just kidding. Let's just cut that out. I shouldn't have highlighted the total because it's getting confused. I think that's a different category entirely. Okay, so bear with me a sec. Bar chart, but then that's, yeah, there we go. Okay. So here's the overall distribution between likers of hip-hop, rock pop, and classical, regardless of gender. Here's the women who tend to have a significant more preference for classical, definitely a much bigger green than this green, and a bit less for rock pop. If it was just this difference, I still think you'd say these are not independent, and this definitely cinches it. That's a very significant difference. Okay, so we conclude, we conclude that gender is not independent from music preference. That's supposed to be a semicolon. They are significantly associated. So, for example, if you were promoting a classical music concert, you might not be that interested in promoting it to men, or you might be fine if you have an advertisement that's skewed towards women, because they're much more likely to like it. Hip-hop, you wouldn't want to have something that's skewed one way or the other, or maybe it wouldn't matter, but there's no reason for it to be skewed. Okay.